Dad said as if that was a flaw. Claire knew for a fact he ordinarily added Tabasco to half of what he ate. Mind if I get a refill? Eve jumped up like a jack-in-the-box. I'll get it! But Dad was at the end of the table closest to the kitchen and he was already on his feet heading in the direction. Michael and Shane exchanged looks. Claire frowned trying to figure out what they were looking so alarmed about. They sat in silence as the refrigerator open bottles rattled, and then it closed. Dad came back, one cold frosted Coke in his hand. In his other hand he held a beer. He sat in the center of the table and glared at Michael. You want to explain why there's beer in the refrigerator with a 16-year-old in the house? Not to mention that none of you is old enough to be drinking it. Well, that was that, some days. But I thought you just couldn't win. She had 2 days, and only because Dad agreed to allow her to go to the admissions office and file transfer paperwork. Michael tried his best, but even angelic good looks and complete sincerity weren't good enough this time. Shane had stopped finding it amusing at some point and started yelling. Eve had gone to her room. Claire had cried, a lot, furiously. She was so angry, in fact, that she barely cared that Mom and Dad were going to be driving out in Morganville in the dark, unprotected and unwarned. Michael took care of that, though, with a story about carjackers stealing SUVs in the area. That was the best anyone could do, and more than Claire wanted anyway. Dad looked at her like she was a disappointment. She'd never ever been a disappointment before, and it totally pissed her off. But she didn't deserve it, not one bit. Michael and Shane stood in the doorway, watching her parents hurry to their SUV in the dark. Shane. She saw had a big hand-carved cross, and he was ready to charge to the rescue. Even though he was mad as hell, he didn't need to though. Mom and Dad got in their trunk and drove away into the hushed Morganville night. And Michael closed and locked the door and turned to look sorry. That could have gone better. You think? She shot back. Her eyes were swollen and hot, and she felt like she might vibrate apart. She was so mad. I'm not leaving. No way, Claire. Michael reached out and put his hand on her shoulder. Until you're 18. You really don't have the right to say that, okay? I know you're almost 17. You're smarter than 90% of the people in the world. 100% smarter than anybody else in this house, Jane said. But that doesn't matter. It will. But it doesn't right now. You need to do what they say. If you decide to fight them, it's going to get ugly. And Claire, we can't afford it. I can't afford it. You understand? He searched her eyes and she had to nod. Sorry. Believe me, it isn't the way I wanted it to happen. But at least she'll be out of Morganville. You'll be safe. He hugged her. She felt her breath leave for a second, and then he was gone, walking away. Good, Shane. Well, I'm not hugging you, he said. He was standing close to her, so close she had to crane her neck way up to meet his eyes. And for a long few seconds they didn't say anything. He just watched. In the living room, she heard Eve talking to Michael, but here in the hallway it was very quiet. She could hear the fast pounding of her heart, and wondered if he could hear it too. Claire. I know, I'm 16, heard it already. He put his arms around her, not the way Michael had exactly. She didn't know why it was different, but it was. This wasn't a hug, it felt close. She wasn't holding himself back. That was it. And she relaxed against him with a breathless sigh, cheek against his chest, almost purring with relief. He rested his chin on the top of her head. Felt so small next to him. But that was all right. Didn't make her feel weak. I'm going to miss you, he whispered, and she leaned back to look at him again. Yeah. She really thought that he was going to kiss her, but just then she heard Eve call, Shane! And he flinched and pulled back. You made things exciting around here. Sorry, I skipped a lot out there. Shane! And he flinched and pulled back, and the old Shane, the cocky Shane, went back. You made things exciting around here. He looked off down the hall, and she felt a pure burst of fury. The boys. Why were they always such dumbasses? The night did its usual tricks. Creepy creaking sounds upstairs, wind hissing at the windows, branches tapping. Claire couldn't sleep. She couldn't get used to the idea that this lovely room, was hers for only 2 more nights. And then she'd be carted off, humiliated and defeated. Back home. And where would her parents let her go anywhere now? She'd have to wait out the next year and a half, which meant that her admission paperwork would have to be redone, and she'd have to start all over. At least it didn't matter now if she blew off classes. She thought and punched her pillow into a more comfortable shape several times. If she had been asleep, even a little asleep, she'd have missed the knock on the door. As light as it was, but she was wired and full of restless energy, and she slipped out of bed and went to unlock it, and swung it open. It was Shane. He stood there, clearly wanting to come in, not daring to come in as uncertain as she had ever seen him. He was wearing a loose t-shirt and sweatpants, feet bare, and she felt a white-hot wave of something sweep over her. This had to be what he slept in, or maybe less than that. Okay, she really needed to stop thinking about that. She became aware, a hot second later, that she was standing there in a thin, oversized t-shirt, one of Michael's old ones, with bare legs from mid-thigh down, half naked wouldn't be overstating it. Hi, he said. Hi. Did I wake you up? No, I couldn't sleep. She was acutely aware of the bed behind her, covers all twisted. Do you want to, come in bed or not? He said after Claire, He shook his head, brown hair swinging loose around his face. I shouldn't even be here. But he wasn't leaving either. Well, I'm sitting down. If you want to, stand there. Fine. She went to the bed and sat. Careful how she did it. Laced together, prim and proper. Her toes barely brushed the carpet. She felt alive and tingling all over. She looked down at her hands and ragged fingernails and picked at them nervously. Shane took 2 steps into the room. For the next 2 days, I don't want you leaving the house, he said, which was not what she was expecting him to say. Not at all. Your dad already thinks we're getting you drunk and staging orgies in the hallway. Last thing I want is to send you home with fang marks in your neck, or in a coffin. His voice dropped lower. I couldn't stand that. I really couldn't. You know that, right? She didn't look up. He came a step closer, and his bare feet and sweatpants came into her vision. Claire, you've got to promise me. I can't. I'm not some little kid, and I'm not your sister. He laughed, low in his throat. Oh yeah, that. I know, but I don't want to see you get hurt again. His hand cupped her chin and warmed and tilted her face up. The whole world hushed. One perfect second of stillness. I didn't even think. Her heart beat. His lips were warm and soft and sweet, and the sensation just blinded her, made her feel awkward and scared. Nobody ever, I'm not doing it right. She hated herself, hated that she didn't know how to kiss him back. She knew he was measuring her against all those other girls, those better girls he'd kissed. It stopped. Her heart was beating so fast it felt like a bird fluttering in her chest. She was flushed, and hot, and warm, so warm. Shane pressed his forehead to hers and sighed his breath, warmed her face, and this time she kissed him, letting her instincts guide her, letting him pull her to her feet. Their hands were clasped, fingers laced in parts of her, parts she'd only ever warmed up alone, were going full blast. This time, when they came up for air, he pulled completely back. His face was flushed, his eyes were bright. Claire's lips felt swollen, warm, utterly deliciously damp. Oh, she thought. I guess I should have done the tongue thing. Putting theory into practice was hard when her brain kept wanting to short out entirely. Okay, she said, that shouldn't have happened. Probably not, she had admitted. But I am leaving in 2 days. It'd be stupid I've never even kissed him. She wasn't absolutely sure who kissed whom this time. Maybe it was gravity tilting. Stars exploding. It felt like it. His hands were free this time. And they cupped her face, stroked her hair and neck, and down to her shoulders. She gasped into his mouth, and he moaned, moaned. She had no idea a sensation could go through her like that, traveling through her skin and nerves like lightning. His hand stopped right there, at her waist, when their tongues touched, gentle and sensitive and wet. He made her knees weak, made her whole spine rattle like dry bones. Shane put his right arm around her waist, holding her close, and cupped the back of her head with his left. Okay, this was kissing. Serious kissing. Not just a kiss before moving out, not a goodbye. This was hella sexy and wow. She'd never even suspected that he could feel this way. When he let her go, she fell back to sit down to the bed, utterly weak, and she thought that if he followed her, she'd fall back. And Shane took 2 giant steps backward, then turned and walked out into the hallway. Facing away from her, in a kind of dreamlike trance, she watched the strong, broad muscles of his back moving under his shirt as he took deep breaths. Okay, he said finally, and turned around but saying well out of the way, okay, that really shouldn't have happened. And we're not going to talk about that, right? Ever. Right, she said. She felt like there was light dripping from her fingertips, spilling out of her toes.